I just came back home after being missing for 15 years. Hello, my name is Phil and I am 19 years old. Yesterday, my mother and father saw me for the first time in 15 years. It would have been an amazing moment had I not been lying on the front yard of their house, blindfolded with my arms and legs tied together. I woke up this morning to our house filled with all of our close family members and a couple of reporters. A police officer showed up at around 3 p.m., but he told us he would just wait around till everyone left. The reporters tried to get information out of me, but I was not in the mood to give them any information. My aunt and uncle asked me if they hurt me, but before I could tell them no, another reporter started to bombard me with questions. Annoyed, I left the living room and sat in the kitchen for the next hour. Everyone left except the police officer around 4 p.m. He asked me if he could speak with me in private. We went to the kitchen and took our seats at the dining room table. He took out a notepad and with a forced smile on his face, he told me to call him Matt. Me so Matt, I honestly don't know who took me or where I was. Matt, that's fine, I just have a couple of questions. How many other people were with you? Me, well, in total around 25. When I left there were around 17. Matt, all males? Or were there any females? Me, all males. Matt, what was the general age group? Me, no one was under 4 or over 20. Matt, did the people that took you hit anyone? Me, not that I know of. They never laid a hand on me. They did shoot anyone that tried to leave the house. 4 tried to escape while I was there. 1 survived the gunshot and returned to the house the next day. He never said another word to any of us after that. A couple of people were found dead the next morning after they didn't follow a rule, but we never saw them get killed. And not even the person staying in the room with them would notice when they came into the room or how the person was killed. Matt, they? How many people were there? Me, I only saw 2 on guard at a time, but the people seemed to change all of the time. Matt, can you describe what the place looked like? Me, it was a house. A really big house. Not very fancy, but it had around 12 rooms. We all had our names written on a whiteboard next to our specified room. Our fridge was always stocked with enough food for all of us. We had a TV in the living room, but we never could find any channels that worked on it. Each of our rooms had 2 beds and 2 small dressers which contained only 3 of the same outfits. We had a laundry room with a washer and a dryer, but they would only work on Thursday. Matt, 3 of the same outfits. What was the outfit? It was a plain white t-shirt and blue pants. Everyone wore the same exact thing. One 18-year-old kid used blueberries to dye his shirt blue. But the next day I found him lying on his bed dead. He had blueberries and bits of his blue t-shirt in his mouth. No one tried to change up their clothes after him. Matt, how many people died while you were there? Me, I know of 9 people that were killed. 14 people left the house along with me, but I don't know if the rest just went back to their house like me. Matt, could you ever look outside of a window and see what was around you? Me, I stared outside of the windows countless times. Sometimes I would see a person walking around the house carrying a gun, but other than the people, all I could see was countless rows of trees. They stretched so far back and wide I could not see anything else. Matt, did anyone ever come inside of the house? Me, they would come inside to pick up the person that was ready to leave the house. 2 people would come inside and grab the person that was leaving. They would have 2 pieces of rope and a black blindfold. They would tie his arms and legs together and put the blindfold over his eyes. After that, they would carry the person into the wall of trees. Matt, did they ever show their face? Me, no, never. They would wear monkey masks whenever they came in. None of us ever had the guts to take the masks off of any of the people. Matt, thank you for taking the time to answer my questions. I'll contact you back if we have any other questions or if we make any new developments. You're a brave man. Please let us know if you find or remember anything new. After Matt left, I headed upstairs to my bedroom. I passed by my parents' room and heard them quietly talking inside. I put my ear up to the door and heard my father talking to my mother. Margaret, don't worry. This was part of the program. He will come back for 5 days to live with us. After that, they get rid of him and make it look like a suicide. This is the only way they can make it as less suspicious as possible. I rushed to my room and quietly closed my door. I thought about calling Matt, but I really want to figure this out. This morning I woke up to the smell of bacon. I got out of bed, took a quick shower, and went to the kitchen. And my mother gave me a smile and asked me if I was hungry. I gave her a nod and went to the dining room and sat down. So my father came down a couple of minutes later and stood next to me while breathing down my neck. When I looked up at him, he said sharply, So you're just going to sit around and not help your mom with the food? Do you think she's your personal cook? I got up from my chair and walked into the kitchen while my father glared at me the whole way there. When I got to the kitchen, I heard my father scoff while he pulled a chair out. My mother shoved 3 plates of bacon, eggs, and grits and told me to put them on the table. I carried them in and placed the dishes down. I went back in, but my mother walked past me while saying done and put a fork beside each plate. No one spoke during the entire meal. I tried to think of something to say, but each time I thought of something I would quickly dismiss it. I just wanted to see if they would somehow slip up and give me some information about my kidnappers and how they planned on getting rid of me. But once they finished eating, they got out of their chairs and walked back upstairs. I didn't get up until I heard the door to their bedroom close. I tiptoed upstairs and put my ear up to their door, but it was completely quiet. I kept my ear pressed to the door for a bit more until I felt something grab at my right foot. I yelped in surprise when I saw 2 fingers holding onto my toes. My father sneered, "You know it's impolite to spy in on your parents' room, don't you?" I pulled my foot away from his grip and raced downstairs. My father came out with a small handgun and pointed it in my direction. While I ran out of the front door, I heard my father scream out to me, "Sooner or later they're going to get you again. You running away just makes our job easier." I didn't know where I was going, but I knew that I couldn't stay at my parents' house any longer. The next 2 hours was a mixture of running and walking countless steps, with sweat pouring down my shirt. Despite the cold weather, I finally found a welcome sight: a cop car. I flagged the car down, and Matt's head popped out of the window. He didn't ask me any questions. He just told me to get in and explain when we got back to the station. The car ride was filled with silence, which made the next 10 minutes a perfect time to fully think about what the fuck was happening. My parents were definitely in on my kidnapping. But why would they send me away for 15 years, send me back home, and kill me off? Why not just kill me off to begin with? As questions started to flood my head, I felt the car come to a stop, and Matt took off his seatbelt and got out of the car. I followed his lead and walked into the station right behind him. We went to an office in the back of the building and took a seat in front of a desk. He sat down at the opposite end and while crossing his arms said, "Explain." I took a deep breath and told him all about my parents' conversation the night before, how they talked about my kidnappers will get rid of me. Then I told him about the odd breakfast and almost getting shot down by my father when he found out I was trying to eavesdrop on them. He could tell that I was still shaking from the incident, so he asked me if Gather said anything at all while he had the gun in his hands. After calming myself down, I told him that he told me sooner or later they were going to find me. Also, having me run away was just helping them out. Matt wrote down a couple of things from his notepad and asked me if I wanted a coffee or some water. I told him a glass of water would be fine. As he got up and started to head out of the room, I asked him if he could get an investigator or detective or anyone that can figure this out for me. With eyes filled with pity, he told me that since we were a small town, it would take some time to get anyone else down here. He gave me a little pat on my shoulder and walked out the door. He was gone for what seemed like hours. It started as just an annoyance, but it quickly elevated to panic. I tried opening the door several times, but no matter how much I tugged at the door, it remained in the same exact spot. The world around me started to spin and I fell to the ground. I woke up to the sound of a constant beep in the background. When I opened my eyes, I saw a young lady in a white outfit standing in front of me. She smiled widely at me and asked me if I was feeling all right. No, I really wasn't. The sight of her made me freak out. I started to tear at whatever was around me. I grabbed at the pole with my IV attached to it and launched at her. She managed to avoid getting hit by the pole, and pain exploded in my right wrist. I tried to grab for her, but she hurried outside of the room. I got out of bed, but after a couple of steps the dizziness came back and I blacked out once more. It was dark when I woke up again. I saw gauze and tape around my right wrist, and the IV was now attached to my left wrist. I looked around the room and saw that there was a TV in the far right corner. A man was asleep in the next bed over, and there was a little controller attached to the wire on the bed. I found a little icon that looked like a nurse and pressed it. 2 minutes later, a man walked in the room with the same white outfit. The shudder ran down my spine, but I restrained myself. I asked him to turn on some cartoons for me. He showed me how to control the TV with the remote. Before he left, I asked him if I could use his phone to log down a daily log. He hesitated for a second, but handed it to me and told me that I have 2 hours with it before his shift is over. I was repositioning my pillow when I saw an envelope under my pillow. The letter M was written on the front of their envelope. I opened the envelope and took a photo of when I was 4 out. On the back there was a little note for me. "You're only alive because I'm a cop. I wanted to kill you as soon as I talked to you for the first time, but we already have people that will do that for us. Show this letter to anyone if you want. They won't listen. You're the kid that just came back home after being missing for 15 years. The crazy and unstable kid. It's my word against yours, bud. I'm logging to you from the nurse's phone." But as I got to the middle of this log, I had the feeling of being watched. I looked out the window and saw my parents and Matt staring through the window of my room. When my eyes met Matt, he mouthed the word "stay." 2 hours after my last log, I handed the phone back to the nurse and told him about a couple of people staring at me through the window. He looked out the window and turned back around with an annoyed look on his face. With a condescending tone, he said, "It's really not funny to joke around about things like that." Confused, I looked out the window and saw that there was no one there. They were just there when I checked a couple of minutes ago. Where the hell did they go? I knew it would be pointless to try and convince him, so I just told him that I was tired and mistook reflections with people outside. He nodded his head and walked out of the room. It was now around 11 p.m. and I could not fall asleep. I turned on the TV and flipped through the channels, but nothing really interested me. My stomach started to growl, so I pressed the button with the nurse on it and waited around. 5 minutes later, a lady walked in and asked, "You need something?" I told her I was hungry, and she left without saying a word to me back. 20 minutes later, she came back in with a couple of carrots and ranch. I looked at the plate with obvious disappointment and asked if they had anything else. I stared down at my plate for a couple of seconds after I asked her, and when I looked back up, she was gripping onto the side of my bed with both of her hands. Her knuckles started to become white and her breathing started to get heavier. With as much venom as she could muster, she whispered, "Listen to me, you little shit. I don't want you to eat. I want you to fucking starve. You understand me? Eat the fucking carrots or go hungry. I don't give a shit. Just don't fucking press that button again and go to sleep." She stormed out of the room and I sat there confused and worried. I put the plate of carrots and ranch on the side table. I started to get comfortable on my bed when I noticed a pair of eyes looking at me through the window. Slightly pissed off, I looked out the window. I didn't care anymore. I was just tired about whatever the fuck my parents were trying to do with me. Let my kidnappers get me again. I just did not give a shit anymore. Right as I lifted my hand to bang on the window, I saw what was staring at me. My father's dismembered head was placed on top of the bush. His eyes were wide open and his mouth was sewn shut. Matt was lying on the ground next to the bush with his stomach torn open, and my mother had 2 bones sticking out of her chest and head. Right as I was about to start screaming, I felt someone covering my mouth with tape. I tried to twist around, but the person holding me was far too strong. I struggled as a cloth bag was placed over my head, and I flailed around as much as I could while my arms and legs were getting tied together. The person picked me up and at a very fast speed. I heard him rushing out the doors, and the cold air instantly hit me. He stopped running and I heard the sound of a car trunk opening. I tried screaming through the tape, but I knew there was no way anyone could hear me. I was thrown down and the person closed the trunk door. I heard 2 doors open and shut, and a couple of seconds later I felt the car peeling out. I knew for a fact that I was going to die. There was nothing I could do. I tried to get as comfortable as I could, but the trunk was far too small. Every single minute I felt the trunk get smaller and smaller until I couldn't move my body at all. Having a bag over my head and only able to breathe through my nose made me feel like I was truly trapped and helpless. I just wanted to die. I wanted to give up. But even that option had been taken away from me. That is when I decided to start throwing my body against anything that was in my way. I started to gain more and more space, until the car came to a stop. The sound of a child's laugh brought a wave of fear across my body. Was I back at the house? Is there where I spend my last minutes? I heard the trunk open and they started to grab the items that surrounded my body. After a couple of minutes, I felt 2 small hands grab my ankles and 2 larger hands grab me by my shoulders. I tried to jerk my body so they could lose their grips, but they held strong and kept carrying me. They sat me down on a chair and took the bag off of my head. I found myself in a house, but not any house I've seen before. We were in what seemed like the living room. It was dark in the living room, but I could still see both of their faces. A man who looked to be struck with infinite depression, and a little boy who seemed to be the happiest thing around. The boy stuck out his hand and said, "Hey bud, We're kind of the same. You lost your parents and I lost mine? It's okay. They were bad people. By the way, your mom didn't taste as good as your dad, so I didn't really want to finish off your mom. But your dad is kind of still with us." The man put his hand up to the boy and stared at me for a bit before saying, "I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but be calm. We were told to help you." So we did. I wanted to be calm. I really did, but after what the boy said, how did they expect me to be calm? I tried to think of a way to ask a question that won't set the boy off on me. For the eating. I know they were evil, but why them and not anyone else? Why did you take me instead of just leaving me there? The man sighed and glared at the boy. He shrunk down in his seat and muttered, "I was just trying to help." The man looked back at me and said, "We kill because that's what we were told to do. Sometimes we don't kill, but most times we do." The boy has developed tastes through his parents. They did the same thing we do now, but they have started to lose control with hunger and started killing innocent people. I don't know why they chose your parents and the cop. I really don't. They told me to take you, so we did. He stared off into the kitchen after his statement. After thinking about his answer, I only had one more question. They? After a couple of seconds, he looked back at me and shrugged his shoulders and pointed at a door. "There's your room. You have a phone that you can use. There is internet. But I advise against contacting anyone you know. I'm tired, I'm going off to bed." They took the ropes off of me and the boy skipped into the room next to mine and the man sat down in the couch behind me. I had more questions, but I started to walk to my room. When I opened my room, I heard the man cough behind me. I looked back at him and he said with a tear falling from his eyes, "I lost everything. Just know that. I had a wife and a 2-year-old kid, but all of that was ripped away. I don't know what is going through your head right now, but just know that we are here to help you. Look through the phone. You'll find answers." I told him thanks and walked in my room. It had a bed and a little side table. A phone was lying on top of the side table attached to a charger. I took it off of the charger and looked around the phone till I found the button to power it on. There were only 2 icons on the screen. One was for a browser which I used to write down this log to you all. The other one was a simple looking app. A blue box with a white circle inside of it. It was called Life is Beta. I didn't feel like looking into it tonight, but tomorrow I will look into it. The whole day took its toll on me, and I fell asleep quickly. In the middle of the night, I woke up to something hitting against my legs. I heard the boy start screaming. What if he tastes as good as his dad? I just want a taste. Let me just have a taste. The man finally got the boy calmed down and sat him down on the ground. He sat in front of the boy and said, "Drew, you can't be like them. I love you like a son, but you need to calm down." They got up and left the room. I couldn't sleep after that. I sat in my bed and looked through the browser on my phone. Nothing really sparked my interest. It was just a bunch of shit about the new president and countless numbers of lists that I must read. I closed out of the browser and clicked on the Life is Beta icon. The screen went black before white letters floated around the screen. They slowly started grouping together words until they finally placed themselves in their designated spots. "We've saved your life, and all we ask is for you to make a decision." The letters started to fall off of the screen, and 3 words took its place. "Choose. Be killed." I tried to leave the app, but the screen remained the same. I tried hitting the power button, but the phone would not turn off. When I took the back off of the phone, the number 5 floated on top of the word choose. The number then changed to 4 and then 3. When it hit 1, I tapped on the icon that said kill. The app closed down and I turned the phone off. So I still heard the man talk to Drew in the other room. After listening to them mumble a bit more, I fell back asleep. This morning I woke up to the smell of bacon. I jumped out of bed thinking I was still at my parents' house, but when I saw the log walls, I could finally calm myself down. I turned on the phone and saw the app logo flashing. When I clicked on it, I saw a character that looked exactly like me inside floating in the middle of the screen. He was flashing, so I tapped on him, and the phone went black for a second and showed the character sitting in an identical bed as me. I walked out of the door and walked to the kitchen and sat down on the sofa in the living room. The animated version of the guy walked up to me and gave me a plate of bacon and scrambled eggs. The sound of knocking came from my phone. We both jumped up and the man put a finger up to his lips. He walked up to the door and saw another man walk in. He was wearing a shirt with a small cookie on the right side of his shirt. The screen went black and came back to another scene. I was done with my food and the man was talking to me. I saw the cookie shirt man take out a small pocket knife from his back pocket. Before my character could react, a knife was lodged into the middle of his head. The man ran out, leaving the knife in my head. The screen went black and came back to a white screen. Kill or be killed flashed in black letters before the app closed down. I threw the phone on the bed and walked out into the living room. There weren't any chairs in the kitchen, so I took a seat on the sofa. Sweat started to pour down my forehead, but I ignored it. This must be some kind of joke the two decided to pull on me. The man came out and asked me if I was okay. I nodded yes, and he went back into the kitchen. He asked from the kitchen, "Bacon and scrambled eggs sound good to ya?" I called back yes and sank into the couch. After a couple of minutes, he came back out with 2 plates of bacon and eggs. My stomach growled in response, but my brain kept me from being happy about a good meal with what seemed like good company. He stared at me for what seemed like hours, but he finally said, "Hey man, my name is Stefan, by the way. I'm sorry if I have been mysterious so far. It's just I am handling a recent loss myself. It's not only been a little over a week, but it hurts as much as the first day. I had to leave my wife and kid, but I can only imagine how you must be feeling. I understand, man. I really do. Kid's name is Drew, and he is still a bit unstab." His last sentence was cut off by the sound of knocking. I started to panic and Stephen asked me what was wrong, so I whispered back to him about what the app showed. Stephen stared off into space for a while before saying, "Good, I thought he was always an asshole." He grabbed a knife from the kitchen and answered the door. The man that was supposed to kill me stood in the entrance with a smile on his face. "Hi," Stephen said. "Morning, Andrew. I wasn't expecting you for another 3 days." Andrew looked at him for a second and said, "Beta told me you were helping a kid out. Told me to come." "Come." Andrew started walking towards me, and Stephen crept behind him for a couple of paces before jamming the knife in Andrew's back. Andrew fell to his knees while Stephen stabbed him 3 more times in the back. The whole entire time Andrew laughed and pointed at me. He shouted out, "They'll find you. They'll find you and kill you like the little bitch you are." He kept laughing before taking his final breath and laid still on the ground. I heard the sound of little footsteps behind me, and I looked back to see Drew grinning ear to ear. He shouted with joy, "Oh, you did it. He's dead. I can't wait to see how he tastes." And my mom and daddy told me that he must be sweet from all the cookies he made and ate. Stephen responded back with, "No time, we need to get out of here now. Beta told me that we need to leave by 8, and it's already 7:45. Drew started to whine, but followed us to Stephen's car. When we were all seated in the car, Stephen started speaking. "We have 1 hour. 12 miles away there is a woman. She's about to kill 8 kids in a school. We get her while she is walking from the parking lot to the school entrance. I'll slow down in front of her, and you guys take care of the rest." He started to drive down the road, and I started to relax into my chair. I looked to my right to look out the window, but see Drew staring at my chest. He breathed deeply into my ear before whispering, "You do smell just like your father, so I wish I didn't leave the meat back at the house." He rubbed the side of my neck with his fingers and giggled. Before I could say anything, he was back in his seat. After a couple of minutes, Stephen pulled into an old parking garage. We were the only car there, and I started to get out of my chair when he parked. While I grabbed for the handle, Stephen grabbed me by my throat. Drew tossed a cloth bag over my head, and they dragged me out. I landed on hard concrete. I grunted and started to scream. Drew laughed and said, "Screaming won't help. There is no one around. You chose to be killed, and that's what we're here to do." They took the bag off of my face and found Drew's face incredibly close to mine. He smiled before slapping me lightly on my face. Stephen looked like he was about to cry, but he managed to contain his emotions. He took out a gun from the back of his pants. He said, "I'm sorry," before putting the gun up to my forehead. I didn't want to sob or plead for my life, but I couldn't think of a different way to react. With snot and tears running down my face, I pleaded for my life. I told them I chose to kill, not to be killed, but Drew kept laughing. Stephen said sorry one last time before pulling the trigger. Drew fell on my lap. I looked at Stephen, and he was crying. He knelt beside Drew and held his head in his hands. He wailed, "You were the only thing that replaced what my son was to me. I loved you even though I knew you for 5 days. But please know I loved you. Please. I'm begging you. Please know that I loved you. Please, please, please." I wanted to comfort him, but I didn't know what to say. "We are in a hotel now. I'm on Stephen's phone. We went to a nearby forest and Stephen buried Drew's body next to an oak tree. Stephen cried throughout the whole process. Once he put the last scoop of dirt over the makeshift grave, he fell on his knees and started to sob. When I thought about patting him, but decided he just needed his own space. After a couple of minutes, Stephen got up and started to walk towards his car. I followed behind him and got in the passenger side. For the next hour, all I heard was the heavy breathing by Stephen. His eyes were bloodshot red and his hands gripped the steering wheel a little tightly to the point to where his knuckles had started to turn white. He pulled to a small restaurant and we got out and walked inside. The lady in the front took us to a table and he ordered the bacon and egg special. I ordered the same thing and she carried our menus away and walked up to the cook. I looked around the restaurant. We were the only ones here, but the restaurant seemed to be doing fairly well. All of the TVs were newer and the seats were almost completely new. The kitchen looked to be very well maintained. The color red seemed to be the theme of the restaurant. The seats, tables, and the kitchen walls were all red. I enjoyed that color, but I thought to myself about how I would have replaced the color from red to blue. I didn't realize how hungry I was until I saw the feast before my eyes. I started to devour every single salty strip of bacon and eggs. Halfway through my meal, I felt my phone buzz. Stephen heard my phone buzz and started to stare at me when I decided to eating instead of check the phone. When he realized I had no intentions of checking, he said, "I really recommend checking the phone. That's why you're still alive. It saved you from Andrew and Drew." He went back to his meal while I reluctantly took my phone out of my pocket. When I turned on my phone, it automatically went to Life is Beta. My character was glowing and floating in midair. Underneath his body, New Experience appeared. I clicked the body and the screen showed my character standing in the same Typtumstreichstaller. The screen slowly started to pan away from my character and went to the kitchen. There was a man lying on the floor, gagged and tied up. He was flailing around the floor, and his legs were mostly cut out. The cook walked up to him and bent down next to his body. He used his knife to cut off part of his thigh. But when he cut out a sizable piece, he started to remove the fat from the meat. So once he was done removing the fat, he put the fat on the stove and cooked the bacon with it. He threw the meat in the trash can and focused on the bacon. The man on the ground started to sob, but the cook walked up to him and jammed his foot on the guy's mouth. The screen went black again and bounced back to my character. My character got out from his chair and started to walk out. Stephen's character tried to catch up to mine, but he was far too slow. The cook came out and grabbed Stephen by the back of his shirt. Stephen tried to fight him off, but the cook was far too strong. On the next scene, Stephen looked like he was there for days. His legs and arms were peeled off to the bones, and the cook looked hungrily at his midsection. The last thing I saw was the cook plunging his knife into Stephen's chest and pulling the knife down. After that, my phone screen went back to my home screen. I wanted to leave. I knew that was the only way to save my ass, but I just couldn't leave Stephen here to die. I didn't eat another bite of my breakfast, but I waited till Stephen was done. Once Stephen was done with his meal, we went back to his car and drove away. After enduring the silence for over an hour, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I saw that we had parked outside of a huge 3-story brick house. He got out of the car and motioned to me to follow him inside. I walked up beside him right as he knocked on the front door. A man in a monkey mask answered the door and panic started to take over me. I tried to run away, but Stephen grabbed me by my right shoulder. He calmly said, "Hey Grant, am I here early?" The man in the monkey mask shook his head no and said, "Come inside. It's cold." Stephen started to walk inside, but when he saw that I hadn't moved a muscle, he grabbed my arm and dragged me in with him. A flood of memories hit me like a tidal wave. The woman dressed in all white that would come into our rooms. She would start by rubbing my thighs and telling me everything was okay. She would then start showing me pictures on her phone of men lying on the ground in several impossible positions. Men with their arms around their right knee and the hand sticking inside halfway through his mouth. And men with half of their midsection cut off and their tongue on the middle of their thighs. One guy that would come into our house with a knife in his hand. He would whisper, "Are you the one?" before finding the right boy and plunging the knife into his chest. They gave us schooling every week, but on Wednesdays they would tell us the best way to end a person's life. In the middle of my thoughts, Stephen grabbed his pocket knife out of his back pocket and plunged it into Grant's neck. As Grant started to cough up blood, Stephen tossed me his keys and shouted, "Go." I didn't want to leave him there. I really didn't. In the last couple of days, he was the only one that I have grown to trust. The only one that I have felt was actually family. He had taken down 4 people before getting stabbed dozens of times by 3 other people. I knew I couldn't help him. I knew that the only person I have loved is now dead. I ran to his car and started up his engine. I watched him while he drove his car, but no matter how long I watched him drive, I managed to wreck his car within the first 10 minutes I drove his car. I couldn't find any building to find shelter in. I decided to sit next to an oak tree. Drew may have been a messed up child, but that was how he was raised. That was the truth he grew up believing. Stephen had a normal life until he found the app. I only had a taste of a normal life through the app. I know it may seem like a bad thing, but I owe Life is Beta my life. They have showed me what it felt like to have someone truly love you like family. In the middle of rushing this out to you all, I've had 2 notifications. One being from Life is Beta. It was just a simple quote. Though 3 gave their life for our cause, 14,000 have joined today to kill. We will grow, and we will make the world a better place. The next was the sound of people mimicking monkey noises all around where I sat. I'm sorry. I couldn't help get rid of them, or find every single answer I wanted to get. But I now appreciate life. My life and everyone else's. Stephen couldn't get rid of them, but the 14,000 will make a bigger impact. If you find the app Life is Beta on your phone, don't think twice.